Hello ladies and gentlemen, Ghost here, and I have for you today a look at the 5 new weapons build to come out in the spring patch, hopefully around May time. So I did say in a previous video that I wouldn't be looking at the weapons until they were really fully presentable and actually had some skins on them. So by now I'm sure you've already seen some videos about these weapons. However, yesterday they implemented another patch over on the CTE, giving the weapons full skins. Now, it's not all there are some things like reload animations, some of the sights are a little bit off for some of the weapons, which is less than ideal, but you know, most of the stuff is there at the moment, so I feel I'm in a position where I can properly take a look at them. So let's start off with the AN-94. This weapon has been loved and loathed, depending on probably which end of it you are on, in Battlefield 3. Now, if you're not familiar with this infamous weapon and why it was really so infamous, it only had a 600 rate of fire, but if you burst it correctly, I believe the rate of fire was actually around 1200, so if you actually got used to bursting it with the proper intervals, you could essentially fire this weapon faster than any other weapon in the game, and really it became somewhat OP. Those days are gone in Battlefield 4. Now, it does have a burst mode, and just like it did in Battlefield 3, it will fire 2 shots simultaneously, almost, at least in very quick succession, in almost exactly the same spot. So for this reason, it makes it a very good long-range weapon for sniping somebody in the head. Now, these 2 burst shots are so fast they actually fire at 1800 rounds per minute. However, the interval between shots has been increased, so it is no longer possible to get an overall rate of fire of 1200 by burst firing. In fact, right now, the rate of fire of the weapon is only around 600 or so. Now, it does have relatively easy to control recoil, 0.1 left pull, 0.12 right, and 0.24 vertical, with a first shot multiplier of 1.8, which isn't really particularly much. So it really makes this weapon great at long ranges, or if you get caught face to face in a close quarters battle with somebody, it really doesn't stand up to a lot of the competition. Now, as for the aesthetics that they've put on the gun, these skins are not final, they still have a little bit of polish to come on there, but you'll notice, if you look closely, that the magazine is actually crooked. It's kind of crooked off to the right, not sure why they did that, I don't recall that being the case in past Battlefield games. Maybe they were just going for that cool, rugged sort of veteran look, but in any case, I think it does look pretty good. I'm happy with the model, I'm happy with the weapon overall. It's quite comparable to the SAR-21, comes in with the same rate of fire and a similar recoil model as well. It does have the standard damage, drop off and fall off model as the other ARs also. So I'm not sure if people are going to be happy or annoyed at this one. I think for most of the people out there like myself who didn't really use the AN-94 all too much, they'll be perfectly happy. But for some of those people out there who were expecting that 1200 rate of fire, they'll probably be a little bit miffed. Is it a bad thing that they didn't bring in that 1200 rate of fire model? Probably not, because once people got used to using it, it would most likely be the best weapon in the game that would trump everything else. However, do bear in mind that none of these values and figures that I'm going to be giving you for gun statistics are final. This is still just an alpha build. Moving on, we have the second weapon coming back from Battlefield 3, and that is the L86A2. So this was another favourite LMG back in good old BF4. I think a lot of people will be happy to have this one back, and it is now in fact the only LMG that has a magazine capacity of 30. 700 rounds per minute, 650 meters per second for the bullet velocity, and those stats make it very controllable and usable. Side-to-side recoil comes up as 0.185 for left and right, and 0.29 for the upwards with a 1.5 first shot multiplier. So this kind of puts it in a similar group to the U100 ammo-wise, but with a little bit of a better rate of fire. It feels very similar to using your standard AR on the support class, so I think it's a good addition to the game. It's rather obvious to me, and also from reading on Twitter, that DICE are trying to go for some unique weapons. They don't just want to lump in something that's going to be similar to all the current weapons that we have in the game. They want to make things that are unique, things that stand out, but at the same time, things that are usable and not overpowered. So I feel that the L86A2 with that 30 round magazine does exactly that. Right, so next up we have the Grozers. We got the Grozer 1, which is the new carbine, and then we have the Grozer 4, which is the PDW. So let's talk about the carbine first. Comes in with a rate of fire of 725, and then this is the interesting news. It has a max damage of 30, which drops off to 16.7, and it has 30 rounds in a magazine. Bullet velocity is 400 meters per second. Now the reason this is interesting is that it actually makes it the hardest hitting, highest DPS carbine in the game, outdamaging even that of the Ace 52, which does have a max damage of 33, but with the lower rate of fire means it comes just a tad slower DPS wise than the Groza 1. Now some other interesting design choices that DICE have made for this weapon is they've actually made it mandatory to have a vertical grip, and you can't put any barrel attachment on there at all. This is also a bullpup weapon, meaning it's going to have better hipfire accuracy than most other carbines. Now you might be thinking this sounds too good to be true, right? The highest DPS carbine so far, but it comes with a hefty price. So get ready for the recoil stats. 0.4 left pull, 0.4 right pull, 0.57 vertical, and a 2.1 first shot multiplier. Pretty bananas. I've tried killing people with this thing, and yeah, if you can aim it on target, you'll wreck them in a split second, but boy, is it hard to control that recoil and stay on target. So it remains to be seen what DICE will end up doing with this one. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see them change the values for the stats somewhat, because this was pretty crazy weapon-wise. I can understand why they did what they did. They wanted a weapon that stood out, and the Groza 1 definitely does that. It has this high damage model, but it comes at a price. And, you know, maybe as people use it more, they will get used to the really high recoil. But I have a feeling DICE will probably end up tweaking this weapon especially. And then of course we have the Groza 4, which is the PDW that I mentioned earlier. Now the issue I have with this weapon actually is that it seems too similar to me to the AS Val. So it has 700 rate of fire, 21 rounds in a magazine, the exact same damage and drop off model as the AS Val, 300 meters per second velocity, and the reason for that, by the way, is because it has a suppressor equipped. Once again, exactly like the AS Val, and that is a mandatory attachment, you cannot remove that. Recoil comes in at 0.15 left, 0.25 right, 0.31 vertical, and 1.25 first shot multiplier. I just don't really see where this weapon fits in. It has the same damage model as the AS Val, but it has 200 less rounds per minute, really, and you know, it's got that suppressor thing on there. The AS Val's a great weapon, you know, it was already very unique. I just don't really see why they've gone ahead and made another weapon that seems so similar to that. What I would actually like to see them do with the AS Val is change the AS Val back to the way it used to be in Battlefield 3. So the AS Val used to have a maximum damage of 20, not the 30 that it currently has in Battlefield 4, but the real niche of this weapon is that those first two shots would go dead on wherever you shot them. Now you had to be standing still, so moving whilst you were firing the weapon was not an option, but if you could double tap somebody in the head with this thing, you could cause 80 damage to them before the fall off started. Now you couple that with the low first shot multiplier and the fact that it has 900 rounds per minute, and you could drop people really quick. It was one of those weapons that you really had to put some time into learning. You also had to put a lot of time into playing with the weapon to unlock the extended magazine, because before you unlock the extended magazine and were able to have a 30 round magazine, this thing really wasn't that good at all. So I would like to see them really take the AS Val in that direction and leave the Groza 4 where it is right now. Now, one other slight complaint I do have about it at the moment aesthetically is that the weapon model takes up a lot of your screen. It's quite off-putting. It's really in an uncomfortable zone around your crosshair, in my opinion, and the reload animation as well is rather uncomfortable. The reload animation is also very long when compared to the AS Val. So yeah, not really one of my favourite weapons so far, but we'll see how DICE change that one. And finally, we have the Mare's Leg. Is it a rifle or is it a pistol? That is the question, apparently. Now you might be thinking, why in the world is this weapon called the Mare's Leg? Well, the name comes from a 1950s show starring Steve McQueen where he had a sawn-off Winchester rifle, which he called the Mare's Leg. This was in the show Wanted, Dead or Alive. And since then, Winchester rifles of the similar sort have become known as Mare's Legs. So that's where the name comes about. Now this weapon definitely has the cool factor for me. You feel like a bit of a cowboy, and the reload and chambering system on this weapon is completely different. So unlike most rifles using a bolt action chambering mechanism, this one has a lever action, which actually allows you to keep your finger closer to the trigger mechanism and therefore fire the weapon with a much higher rate of fire. So that, coupled with the fact that it's short enough to, well, really be, kept under your belt as a pistol, means that we're actually using this as an offhand. We're using this as a pistol in Battlefield 4. Now the damage model is exactly the same as the 44 Magnum, with the one exception that it has a much better drop-off, meaning that you're able to headshot people at range far easier. The bullet travel time is also far superior to the Magnum at 520 meters per second. Now the only drawback is the rate of fire. The Magnum has a rate of fire of 150, the Mare's Leg comes in at 100, as that chambering mechanism does take a little while to work. Now I really like this weapon, it's so cool. In fact, I was running around with a PDW when I was trying out the Groza, and I suddenly thought, wow, what a perfect companion to have for a short range weapon. I can put on the Mare's Leg, put a 7 or 8 times scope on there, and if anybody's trying to snipe me at range, I can try and headshot them. Now I do worry a little bit that this weapon could become a little bit on the OP side. Maybe not, I could be wrong about that, because after all, it's not really going to be one of those oh shit weapons that you can pull out and spam at the enemy if you empty out your primary in close quarters. I mean, sure, you can pull it out and you can perhaps take one shot, but that's not always going to cut it if you miss. This is really for the other scale of things. It's for when you have those enemies at far ranges and your primary can't really reach them, you can pull out the Mare's Leg. But it struck me after using this weapon on all of my loadouts in the CTE just how useful it actually can be. Now one strange thing with the weapon at the moment is actually the reload animation. You can see here whenever I reload that the majority of the weapon's model is actually hidden underneath the minimap. Now I don't really know if that was intentional or not. Maybe some people prefer that because then it's not really blocking their screens, but for me I think they should show it. Especially with the Mare's Leg being a lever action rifle, it also has a different ammo storage system. So unlike most rifles where you have a magazine that's inserted into the weapon, this one actually has a tubular magazine which is running parallel to the barrel of the weapon just underneath it. So as you can see, you load the rounds one by one into the side of the weapon here, just like you would with a shotgun. But overall, I do like the direction that DICE are taking the new weapons and the maps for the spring patch and any further DLC that they have available for Battlefield 4. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little review or sneak peek of the weapons and their current state. Thank you for watching the video, guys. Give it a like down below if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.